I like working on understanding what works and what doesn't in human systems. To me, that's not optional. That's a moral obligation. If you're capable of understanding the world, you have a moral obligation to become rational. And I don't see how you become rational hoarding gold. Even if it works, you're a jerk. So I advise you to get concerned with equities.
Let me rephrase the first part of my question. Would the United States follow the path of Japan in the last 10 or 15 years, the long term of almost zero economic growth?
Well, the answer to that is, of course we could. It's like the man said about baptism. I believe in it because I've seen it done. Japan has proved that an advanced nation can have a long period of utter stasis following a bust. Are we going to be like Japan? Or are we going to do better? I think we're going to do better. But I don't think if we have trouble, I don't think we'll handle it as well as Japan. Japan is a very courteous, submissive, amazing place. If they were going to have a long period of stasis, you could hardly find people who would handle it better if you selected over the whole earth. They have the right behavioral ethos to. Here, I think we'd have a lot more tension if we had a long period of no growth at all. And so I hope we aren't in for that. But if we did have it, in the big scheme of things, is that a tragedy? At the current living standards of the United States, would it be a tragedy if we held level for a considerable period? By the big time scale of human tragedy, that is not way worse threatens. But yes, could that happen? Of course it could happen. It did happen. And remember, Japan paid every fiscal trick known to man and every Keynesian trick known to man. And they got 20 years of stasis. Now it's a different place, different system. We're different. It doesn't mean you can, but is it conceivable? Of course it's conceivable. It's conceivable because it happened.
My question as it relates to the economy and as it relates to some of the issues, longer term issues, we obviously have significant pension liabilities and significant healthcare liabilities, but more so to the pension liabilities. How do we go about trying to fix them? And given how underfunded a lot of municipalities are, how do we even come close?
Well, of course it's a terrible problem, and of course there was some deep moral and behavioral failure. Those plans were abused by various manipulative tricks where people got very unfairly high pensions. And of course that's what human nature does. You make it easy to steal, people will steal. And that's what it amounts to when somebody gets $600,000 a year from some poor community full of Latinos with low employment. A man in those circumstances is stealing. We don't call it stealing because he hires lawyers, but he's stealing. And of course that's a big problem, and it happens all over. And of course the unfunded liabilities. They talk about our national debt as a percentage of GDP. The unfunded liabilities of the United States for medical care and pensions in terms of present value are far greater than the national debt that we report. So if we get into a Japan-type situation with no growth, we're in for a hell of a lot of social tensions. But isn't that wonderful for you young people? You get all these interesting problems to live through. But of course it's a serious problem. I personally would not touch Social Security in terms of its present promises. I think net that's been a credit to our civilization. And it's worked with low administrative costs and low fraud, and it's given a lot of people their main dignity in old age. And I think as long as we're as rich as we are, we should find a way to afford it. And I don't think the world comes to an end if we end up supporting Social Security promises with a value-added tax. Personally, I don't expect to live to see a value-added tax because I'm so old. But I think it's a very desirable tax. It subsidizes exports which of course we need with a big balance of payments deficit. And that's the one legitimate way that's permissible to subsidize exports, is to have a value-added tax which exempts export. That's what everybody else has. We have a disadvantage now in terms of trade because of not having a value-added tax.
It's a regressive tax, though, and you said you wouldn't mind if your taxes were higher.
Well, I don't know how regressive it is if you
use more of, if you're a low-income person, you probably use more of your earnings. You're forced to spend more of your earnings to take care of yourself.
No, but there can be exemptions and credits and so forth, or maybe the low-income people pay only the value-added tax, and the other people pay a value-added tax plus an income tax. But there's some different way of organizing the tax system, and so I don't think in a modern democratic civilization that it's feasible to do a lot to tweak Social Security way the hell down. I don't think anybody's going to stand for it, and I don't think it would be a good idea.
Would you be okay if they slowly, if they gradually and slowly raise the retirement age? Would that be okay?
Well, reasonable minds could disagree. I personally wouldn't do it. I would leave the basic Social Security alone and deal with all the rest of the things. We got so much trouble in all the rest, and it's so large, and the unfunded promises are so great, and there's so much misbehavior, that to take on the political ill will from tinkering with some guy who's only got 3 years to live anyway and take away $30 a month, I just don't want to do it. To me, it's a stupid allocation of goodwill and time. And no, I would save my effort for what really matters. And of course, we're going to have to tackle the unfunded promises, and I think we're going to have to change our system of taxation. Basically, I lived through the period of 90% income taxes and the crooked, lying tax shelter salesmen and all. I hated it. We do not want that back. I think a 50% tax, if a guy's a busy surgeon, is plenty for the man to pay. I don't care how much he's making. So I think the existing income tax rates are pretty close to right when you put the state and federal taxes together. On earned income, I do think that we went way too far in favoring people who manage hedge funds. I mean, the idea that, and by the way, they don't just get a 15% tax. They play tricks with foreign, they have all kinds. The tax of our successful one-income class is really trivial, and I don't see any reason why it should be tolerated. I think it's unfair, and the man who said, are you dissatisfied to have all these math and science people going into derivative trading? Of course I'm disappointed. I have a letter I just got this week. The guy has all these advanced degrees in computer science and math and so forth. He works for a hedge fund, and he has 300 million long and 300 million short. He's allowed to deviate between size of the total long and short position by no more than 2%. I think he has to have 300 stocks on each side or something. And he's using computer algorithms, sort of devised by code-breaking skills. And for 6 years, he has made money without knowing a damn thing about the companies or relating any to what happens in capitalism. But he's a brilliant man. And he knows he's in a sick, lousy system. So he writes me this letter. He says, I'm in this sick, lousy system, and this is what I do. He says, what I want you to know, I only bought one stock, and it's BYD, and I'm glad you bought it too. He says, isn't it wonderful what we're doing together? Well, that's my kind of a fruitcake. If he's... At least he regrets what he's doing, which he should. But is it bad for our civilization to have this particular man doing that? When he's capable of figuring out which company is likely to contribute to the civilization and handling real high-tech problems like BYD? Of course, it's a huge misuse of talent. And if I were running the world, I would pass laws that would get all those people either selling apples on the street or doing something more productive.